In Texas today, the defense rested in the racially charged case of 19-year-old Karmelo Anthony, the black Texas teenager charged with first-degree murder of 17-year-old Austin Metcalf, who is white. So far, the jury and the trial has featured days of emotional testimony. There have been gruesome details from the medical examiner for the jurors to listen to, and at times contradictory statements, mostly from the teenagers who make up most of the witnesses. Karmelo Anthony admits to stabbing Austin Metcalf in the heart with a 3.5-inch long pocket knife back in April of last year, when the two teenagers from rival high schools crossed paths at a track meet. Prosecutors say Karmelo Anthony provoked the confrontation by entering and then refusing to leave Austin Metcalf's team's tent. They say he then stabbed Austin Metcalf in a sneak attack. The defense says the much larger Austin Metcalf started the fight, and Karmelo Anthony reacted in a split second of fear.
On an ordinary spring morning, a school track meet meant to celebrate competition and teamwork ended in a scene that would leave an entire community searching for answers. What began with cheering crowds, athletes preparing to compete, and families gathered along the sidelines transformed within moments into chaos. Emergency responders rushed toward a teenage victim suffering from a fatal stab wound, while stunned students stood frozen, struggling to understand what had just happened. In the hours that followed, investigators secured the scene, witnesses gave statements, and a single question echoed across Texas. How had a high school sporting event turned into the center of one of the state's most closely watched homicide cases? As the investigation unfolded, authorities identified 17-year-old Karmelo Anthony as the suspect. Prosecutors alleged that Anthony fatally stabbed fellow student Austin Metcalf during a confrontation that escalated with devastating speed. Anthony was arrested and charged with murder. From that moment, the case stopped being just another criminal investigation. It became a national story, drawing intense media attention, heated public debate, and endless speculation across social media. But beneath every headline was a courtroom where only evidence, not rumors, could determine the outcome. Every filing, every witness, every legal motion became part of a process designed to answer a single question: what happened during those critical moments under the track meet tent? Now, another legal decision has drawn renewed attention to the trial. According to Anthony's defense attorneys, he is not expected to testify in his own defense. While many people instinctively wonder why an innocent person would remain silent, the reality inside an American courtroom is far more complex. Under the U.S. Constitution, every defendant has the right not to testify, and jurors are instructed that they cannot interpret that silence as evidence of guilt. Exercising that right is a common legal strategy, particularly in serious felony cases where prosecutors may aggressively cross-examine the defendant. Still, for the public watching from outside the courtroom, silence often creates its own mystery. Some see it as a calculated legal move. Others inevitably question what was left unsaid. Those competing interpretations have fueled passionate discussions online, but they are not evidence. Ultimately, the verdict must rest on testimony presented in court, physical evidence, forensic analysis, and the law, not public opinion. As this trial moves forward, every witness who takes the stand, every exhibit introduced into evidence, and every legal ruling will carry enormous weight. The prosecution bears the burden of proving guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, while the defense is under no obligation to prove innocence. That distinction lies at the heart of the American justice system, even when emotions surrounding a tragic death run extraordinarily high. This case is about far more than courtroom strategy. It is about two families whose lives changed forever on a single afternoon, a community still wrestling with unimaginable loss, and a legal process now tasked with separating fact from speculation. Before we examine what Anthony's decision not to testify could mean for the trial, we have to go back to the beginning, to understand the people involved, the circumstances leading up to that fatal encounter, and how an ordinary school event became one of the most talked-about criminal cases in recent memory. Long before the courtroom arguments and nationwide headlines, the people at the center of this case were simply two teenagers attending the same high school. Austin Metcalf was known by family and friends as a dedicated student-athlete who enjoyed competition and spent countless hours preparing for track and field events. Those closest to him remembered a young man with ambitious goals and a future that seemed full of promise. Like many students his age, he was looking ahead to graduation, friendships, and the opportunities that waited beyond high school. Karmelo Anthony was also a student-athlete, participating in school activities while building his own future. After the fatal incident, his life changed instantly as he was arrested and later charged with murder. Under the law, Anthony is presumed innocent unless proven guilty in court, and the legal process now centers on determining exactly what happened during the confrontation that ended Austin's life. Investigators have stated that the encounter escalated rapidly during a school track meet, leaving little time for anyone nearby to intervene. While numerous accounts have circulated online, only testimony presented under oath and evidence admitted in court can establish the facts. That distinction has become increasingly important as public opinion continues to shape conversations surrounding the case. As we continue examining every verified detail, remember that our goal is to separate evidence from speculation and present the facts responsibly. If you appreciate balanced true crime coverage that respects both the victims and the legal process, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Cold Case Files, and turn on notifications so you never miss future investigations. What appeared to be an ordinary day at a school sporting event would soon reveal warning signs that few recognized until it was far too late. In the aftermath of the tragedy, investigators began reconstructing the events leading up to the fatal confrontation. Their task was not only to determine what happened in the final moments, but also to understand whether there had been any warning signs beforehand. Witnesses were interviewed individually, surveillance footage was reviewed where available, and every statement was compared against the physical evidence collected at the scene. According to investigators, the encounter between Austin Metcalf and Karmelo Anthony unfolded quickly during the track meet. Prosecutors have alleged that what began as a disagreement escalated into violence within moments. The defense, however, has indicated that its case includes a claim of self-defense, making the circumstances immediately before the stabbing a central issue for the jury to evaluate. As public interest grew, countless theories appeared online. Some posts claimed hidden motives, while others insisted they already knew exactly what had happened. Yet many of those claims were unsupported by evidence presented in court. In any criminal case, speculation can spread much faster than verified facts, making it difficult to separate truth from rumor. For investigators, the focus remained on tangible evidence, witness testimony, forensic findings, and the sequence of events established through the investigation. Every detail mattered because even the smallest inconsistency could influence how the incident was understood. The deeper authorities looked, the clearer it became that this case would likely hinge on seconds rather than hours. Those brief moments before the fatal encounter would become the subject of intense legal scrutiny, with prosecutors and the defense offering sharply different interpretations. As the trial approached, the evidence collected at the scene would begin to reveal how those crucial moments would shape the fight for justice in the courtroom. The violence unfolded in a matter of moments, leaving little time for anyone nearby to react. According to prosecutors, the confrontation between Austin Metcalf and Karmelo Anthony escalated during the school track meet before Anthony allegedly produced a knife and stabbed Metcalf once in the chest. Emergency responders were called immediately, and despite desperate efforts to save him, Austin died from his injuries. A day that had begun with competition and school spirit ended in unimaginable tragedy. In the hours that followed, investigators secured the scene and began documenting every piece of physical evidence. Witnesses described the confusion that erupted after the stabbing, while detectives worked to establish a precise timeline of events. The knife allegedly used in the incident became a critical piece of evidence, along with witness statements and forensic findings. Each detail would later be examined in court as prosecutors sought to prove the murder charge beyond a reasonable doubt. The defense has indicated that Anthony acted in self-defense, making the circumstances immediately before the stabbing one of the most contested aspects of the case. Because of that claim, jurors are expected to carefully consider testimony, forensic evidence, and the credibility of witnesses before reaching any conclusion. It is ultimately their responsibility, not public opinion or social media speculation, to determine what the evidence proves. As investigators continued their work, the focus shifted from the chaotic scene itself to the evidence left behind. Every photograph, every interview, and every forensic report became part of a larger effort to reconstruct those final moments with accuracy. The answers would no longer be found at the track meet, but inside the courtroom, where every fact would be tested under oath and every piece of evidence challenged before a verdict could be reached. As investigators moved beyond the crime scene, the case entered a new phase driven by evidence rather than emotion. Detectives gathered witness statements, reviewed available video footage, analyzed forensic reports, and documented the timeline leading up to and immediately following the stabbing. Each piece of evidence was evaluated to determine whether it supported or contradicted the accounts provided by those present. In a case that unfolded within seconds, even the smallest detail could prove significant. Authorities arrested Karmelo Anthony shortly after the incident, and prosecutors formally charged him with murder. As the legal process advanced, both sides began preparing their cases. Prosecutors focused on presenting evidence they believe establishes criminal responsibility, while the defense signaled that it would argue Anthony acted in self-defense. Because that claim is central to the case, the jury must weigh all admissible evidence before deciding whether the prosecution has met its burden of proving guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The intense public attention surrounding the trial has also complicated the investigation. Social media has been flooded with theories, opinions, and unverified claims, many of which have never been introduced as evidence in court. Investigators and attorneys, however, are bound by the facts contained in official reports and testimony presented under oath, not online speculation. If you're following this case and appreciate fact-based true crime coverage without sensationalizing the evidence, take a moment to like this video, share it with others interested in the case, subscribe to Cold Case Files, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. With the investigation complete, the spotlight shifted to the courtroom, where every decision, every witness, and even Anthony's reported decision not to testify would become part of the legal battle that could determine the rest of his life. As the trial progressed, the courtroom became the place where every piece of evidence faced careful scrutiny. Prosecutors presented witnesses, forensic findings, and testimony they argued established the sequence of events leading to Austin Metcalf's death. The defense challenged aspects of that evidence while maintaining that Karmelo Anthony acted in self-defense. It was then left to the jury to evaluate the credibility of witnesses and determine whether the prosecution had proven its case beyond a reasonable doubt. One of the most discussed aspects of the proceedings was the defense's indication that Anthony would not testify. While this drew widespread attention online, legal experts have emphasized that a defendant has an absolute constitutional right to remain silent. Jurors are instructed that they must not consider a defendant's decision not to testify as evidence of guilt. Instead, their verdict must be based solely on the evidence admitted during the trial and the law as explained by the judge. As attorneys delivered their arguments, both sides asked the jury to interpret the same events in very different ways. Prosecutors argued that the evidence supported the murder charge, while the defense contended that the actions taken were legally justified under its theory of self-defense. Ultimately, it is the jury, not commentators, media outlets, or social media users, that must resolve those competing claims. Regardless of the verdict, the case has already left a lasting impact on everyone involved. For one family, it represents the devastating loss of a son. For another, it represents a young man facing the possibility of life-altering legal consequences. As the proceedings continued, the emotional weight extended far beyond the courtroom, reaching classmates, teachers, and an entire community forever changed by a single afternoon. Long after the courtroom emptied each day, the emotional impact of the case continued to spread throughout the community. For Austin Metcalf's family, every hearing served as another painful reminder of a life cut short. They have publicly mourned the loss of a son whose future was filled with hopes, goals, and opportunities that would never be realized. Friends, classmates, and teachers also struggled to process how an ordinary school event could end in such unimaginable tragedy. The case also deeply affected Karmelo Anthony's family. While Anthony faces a criminal charge and the legal process continues, his relatives have watched the proceedings unfold under intense public attention. Like every family connected to a high-profile criminal case, they have experienced the pressure of widespread media coverage and online commentary. Regardless of public opinion, the legal system requires that every defendant receive a fair trial based solely on the evidence presented in court. Beyond the families, the tragedy sparked broader conversations about school safety, conflict resolution, and how quickly everyday disagreements can escalate into irreversible violence. Community members gathered to remember Austin, while educators and parents reflected on the importance of preventing conflicts before they become life-changing events. Even now, the case remains a reminder that every headline represents real people whose lives have been permanently altered. The emotional wounds extend far beyond the courtroom, affecting classmates who witnessed the incident, first responders who answered the emergency call, and loved ones forced to navigate grief under the public spotlight. As the legal process approaches its conclusion, one question remains: can any verdict truly bring peace after such profound loss, or will the events of that day continue to leave unanswered questions for everyone touched by this tragedy? As this case moves toward its conclusion, one reality remains impossible to ignore. Two families will never return to the lives they knew before that spring afternoon. Austin Metcalf's death left an irreplaceable void in the lives of those who loved him, while Karmelo Anthony's future now depends on the outcome of a legal process that will ultimately be decided by the evidence presented in court. Whatever the final verdict may be, its consequences will extend far beyond the courtroom. The intense public interest surrounding this case has demonstrated how quickly information and misinformation can spread. Throughout the proceedings, countless opinions have circulated online, but the justice system is designed to rely on sworn testimony, forensic evidence, and the rule of law rather than public speculation. Anthony's reported decision not to testify has become one of the trial's most discussed topics, yet under the Constitution, exercising the right to remain silent cannot legally be treated as evidence of guilt. That principle exists to protect the fairness of every criminal trial. Cases like this also remind us how rapidly a single confrontation can change countless lives forever. A moment measured in seconds has resulted in years of grief, legal proceedings, and unanswered questions that will remain with both families and their community for years to come. If you found this breakdown informative and appreciate responsible, fact-based true crime coverage, please take a moment to like this video, share it with others, subscribe to Cold Case Files, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss future investigations. As we close this chapter, one question remains. When emotions, tragedy, and conflicting accounts collide in a courtroom, How should justice balance the search for truth with the rights guaranteed to every defendant? Let us know your thoughts respectfully in the comments below.